What's up, everybody? Welcome to Revision Online. Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are. My name is Mike. I'm one of the pastors here, and I am pumped to be scattered together with you this morning to worship God. I'm going to kick things off with a couple announcements, including one big one about our plans for gathering in person again. But first things first, I want to invite you to pull out your phone real quick and text the word revision to 474747 to let us know you're here. It's just a super helpful way for us to stay connected in this peculiar season of disconnection. I also want to say a massive thank you to everybody who stopped by last Sunday to deliver food for Bidwell Riverside Center and clothing and household items for Many Hands for Haiti. We had an amazing response, and I was just blown away by your generosity. We were able to deliver everything to Bidwell and Many Hands on Monday, and as we unloaded the trailer, there was even more in there than it looked like, and they were incredibly grateful. So thanks. Thank you guys for living out your faith, for letting it move from your heads into your hearts and hands, and for making a difference that helps bring flourishing to people in Des Moines who are in need. You guys are awesome. You're so awesome, in fact, that I miss you, and I can't wait to gather in person for worship on Sundays again. And we're gonna attempt to do that really soon. So here's the plan. We can't technically rent the school building for another month. And also Clive has some major construction projects going on. And on top of that, there's some real challenges right now to doing indoor services in a healthy way. So at Revision, we're getting creative. And we're gonna try something I think will be a lot of fun. We rented out the band shell at Colby Park in Windsor Heights, and we're gonna start doing outdoor services at 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings at Colby Park, beginning on June 21st, and we're gonna keep those rolling throughout this summer. It's kind of funny, actually, almost 5 years ago now, the first ever Sunday gathering of Revision Church was about 20 people at Colby Park, and I never thought we'd be back there, and now we're back. And in terms of the outdoor services, clearly there are a lot of details to cover, a lot of questions that you might have. I'm not gonna go into all of that in these announcements, so stay tuned. But there are two major things I want everybody to know. Number one, we have some health procedures and precautions in place that we're gonna outline. But we also know that some of you are vulnerable and it's still unwise for you to go out at all. And others of you are uncomfortable with the idea of that. And so we are going to be live streaming those services and all of our Sunday services from now on. So you can still tune in from wherever you are on Sunday mornings. We're gonna say hi to all of you watching online because you are just as much a part of the community as anyone who's at the park. And number two, if it rains, we're gonna be live online again. Again, there's a whole lot more to say, a whole lot of details. Stay tuned. We're gonna get you that information via the weekly newsletter, social media, and more. This has been a weird season, but you guys, God is on the move. He has done and is doing incredible things, and so we're gonna lean into that. We're gonna get creative, we're gonna do some new and different stuff, and I'm convinced it's gonna be fun, and we're gonna get the chance to continue to see God move and do the kind of stuff only He can do.
Well, hey, Revision Online, we're so glad that you've joined us this morning. We're excited that you are here spending your time with us here today. I think it's safe to say for all of us, it's been a crazy couple of weeks, couple of months, year. I think we can all agree on that. 2020 has been something. But hopefully in the midst of the craziness that is going on in our world, that we can be learning, that we can be listening, that we can have hearts that are willing to open up to have conversations and to listen and to empathize and be with others and to not just listen to the voices around us in our world, but to be listening and leaning into the voice of Jesus and listening to the Spirit. And I've been convicted of that lately, just that it's so easy to hop online, hop on social media, whatever, and get so many different voices coming at you. But the most important voice that we can be turning to in a season like this is the voice of Jesus. And I think if we look at the person of Jesus and look at who He was, we can learn a lot, and we can learn how to navigate seasons like this, because Jesus was for every single person. Jesus came to give freedom to the poor, the oppressed, the weak, the orphan. He came to bring freedom to every person, no matter where they're from, no matter the color of their skin, no matter their gender, no matter what. He came for you, and he came for me. And so, in this time, I just want to encourage us, listen to the voice of Jesus first. It's great to have other input, for sure, and have conversations. We need to be having conversations, but the most important conversation we can be having is with Jesus. And so I want to encourage us this morning as we approach him, as we approach the God of the universe who knows every detail about the entire world. He knows how this story is going to end. When we don't know what the next day might look like, when we don't know what the next year might look like, when we don't know what our kids' future might look like, God does. And he's holding it all as we walk through this season. And so we can trust him. And I encourage you, choose to trust him because he's working and he is moving. And so let's sing together. Let's worship together. Before we do that, let's start our morning praying, all right? Jesus, you are overall. You see every detail. You know every story. You know every heart. You know every intention. And so search our hearts today, God. Convict us where we need to be convicted. Speak to us where we need to be spoken to. Give life to dead bones, to dry bones in this season. God, we trust you. We trust that you're working. We trust that you are moving. And we know that you're a good God. And we know that all things will work out. God, help us to listen. Help us to lean into you today as we hear from you and as we give you honor and glory. It's all yours. Speak, Father. Sing this out. 'Cause even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop. Even when I don't see it, you're working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop. Even when I don't see it, you're working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop. 'Cause even when I don't see it, you're working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. 'Cause you are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God,
is who you are. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you, I worship. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you, yeah, I worship you. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. 'Cause even when I don't see it, you're working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, no, no. 'Cause even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop, no. And even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop. Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 reigns without contention, whose power can't be questioned or contained. With humble fame, he rules the earth and heavens. His glory knows no measure or refrain, and it's bursting past the borderlines of space. Jesus, enthroned upon the praises of our hearts. Jesus, you're the King and you're the center of it all. There is a name reaching past the margins, calling sons and daughters back to Him. And as He saves, we can hear the roar of heaven as prodigals are coming home again. Oh, the triumph of His name will never end. Sing Jesus. Jesus, enthroned upon the praises of our hearts. Jesus, you're the King and you're the center of it all. For every eye will see, and every heart will know, there is no name above the name of Jesus. Death could not hold Him down, no grave could keep Him bound. All sin and sickness bow to the name of Jesus. For every eye will see, every heart will know, there is no name above the name of Jesus. Death could not hold Him down, no grave could keep Him bound. All sin and sickness bow to the name of Jesus. Oh. Come on, every voice, let's sing this out. The name of Jesus. Oh, Jesus, enthroned upon the praises of our hearts. Oh, Jesus, you're the King and you're the center of it all. There is a name that reigns without contention, whose power can't be questioned or contained. With humble fame, He rules the earth and heavens. His glory knows no measure or refrain, and it's bursting past the borderlines of space.
What's up, everyone? My name is Jeff. I'm one of the pastors here at Revision Church, and I am pumped to be able to share with you this morning because we're kicking off a brand new series on wisdom. And now, real quick, before you go turning it off or muting your video because I'm not Mike, just want to let you know that what I think happened was, Mike asked me if I'd kick off this series on wisdom because, well, pretty obviously the wisest guy that he knows. And so he thought it would only make sense that I just let my wisdom cup overfloweth for week one, and I couldn't agree more. I've always thought that my three greatest attributes are my wiseness, height, and humility. And so can't say that I'm surprised at that. 100% totally real conversation happened between Mike and I. No, obviously I am not the wisest person Mike knows. I've got to be pretty average on the wisdomness scale. I mean, I guess I have been told on occasion that I'm wise beyond my years, but then just last week I fell out of a tree and hurt my ankle. And so you can see there's some clear discrepancy there, but the good news is that you're not learning from me. This morning we're going to be opening up the Bible and seeing what it has to say about wisdom, and thank God for that. I know there are 5 books in the Bible generally known as wisdom literature: Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. And wisdom literature, it's a literary genre in the Bible that's pretty straightforward. It's books that deal primarily with wisdom, which makes sense. And the Bible it's cool that way, that it's not just a stack of historical textbooks, but it's filled with different literary genres and themes like poetry and songs and prophecy and historical narrative and apocalyptic literature and letters, amongst a few others, such as wisdom literature, which is what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks in this series. And today I wanted to start in the book of Proverbs. But before we do that, I want to press pause and talk about my first grade teacher, Miss Boron. Now, Miss Boron was one of my most memorable elementary school teachers ever, because she lived on her farm and then she would bring in some of her animals to school, which was super cool. Now, she wasn't raising tigers or anything like that, or at least if she did, she wasn't bringing those in to show the first graders. But I remember she would bring in a few of her horses every year, and we would go outside and we'd ride them around the thawed-out hockey rink when it wasn't winter. And Miss Boron, she'd have her dogs running around too. She'd bring in pictures throughout the year of all of her dogs and cats. But I remember one day she brought in some of her slimier animals, which there were lizards and geckos and crayfish, bearded dragons, and all kinds of snakes. And not just like, I remember a little bag of corn snakes that you could pick up like a handful, and that was super cool, but she brought in her boa constrictor. That's right, a boa constrictor, to a class of first graders. And I know what you're thinking, is that even legal? Like, are there just no rules in the Minnesota public school systems? I don't know. But I do remember as a 6-year-old first grader thinking that these were the coolest days of school ever. And to be fair, I was only in first grade, so I didn't have a ton of school to compare it to, but it was up there for sure. And I remember Snake Day so clearly, because if you wanted, you could take your turn at the front of the classroom and hold this boa constrictor. And I remember it so vividly, just walking up and putting my arms straight out, and then Miss Boron and her adult helper would just lay this thing behind my neck and across my arms. And yeah, on the one side, I'm freaking out because there's this giant snake on me that in one swift coil could just take me down like it was nothing, but I couldn't let that show. Like, I had to keep my composure because I was in front of my entire class. And I wanted all the guys to think that I was super cool, and all the girls to start passing notes around that said, "Did you see how brave Jeff was? What a dreamboat." And you know what? I was a dreamboat. Or at least I felt like one. Like, it's hard to exactly know what the group's perception was, but either way, it was a pretty cool day of first grade. And it was so cool because it was not normal. Like, I didn't grow up in the middle of nowhere. I'm a city kid. Like, we were in the heart of the Twin Cities, 20 minutes from downtown. Like, this was not a normal thing that happened at public school, which is why it was so cool and memorable for me. And because of those experiences I had with my first grade teacher, I'll never forget her. That's for sure. And it's fascinating for me to go back and just think about how every relationship that we have has an impact on our personal lives. Like, every single one. Now, obviously, some more than others. Like, your parents, they're going to have more of an influence on you than, say, like your mailman. And unless maybe he's just like the really dynamic mailman. But every relationship, it has some kind of impact on your life. Like, you might have some teachers or professors who you've basically forgotten, but others whose perspective and worldview has shaped yours, and you're never the same after having interacted with them. Like, for instance, a crazy first grade teacher who sets boa constrictors on 6-year-olds. You don't forget that. But when we think about it, we have all of these different relationships in our lives with varying levels of impact. But for each one of us, too, there's a handful of relationships that when we enter into them, they leave no area of your life unchanged. Like, you think of someone who's getting married or having kids, and those are just 2 easy examples of relationships that when you enter into them, no area of your life remains untouched. Like, just think about it. It'd be pretty weird if you had a friend get married and then you saw them later and you're like, "Hey man, how's it going? How's being married?" And they go, "You know what? It hasn't really changed my life at all. Like, really, nothing's changed." And you're like, "What?" Like, you wouldn't celebrate that. You'd say, like, do you guys need counseling? Like, what's going on? What's wrong? What happened? You just knit your life together with that person? And, like, that deep, intimate union, it has implications for how you spend money, where you live, what you do with your time, how you spend your Friday night. Like, it has implications for every part of your life. And the same thing with being a parent. Like, if someone had a kid and you said, "Oh, what's it like being a parent?" And they're like, you know, it's changed nothing about my life. I spend my money the same, I do all my stuff the same. And you go, I don't think that's how it's supposed to be. I would think that becoming a parent should have a profound impact on how you make choices, like your perspective of yourself when you look in the mirror and how you navigate this world. Like those relationships, they should change everything. And let me say something, this is never more true than in a relationship with God. Like if you're a Christian and you would say that you know God, that should change every part of your life. Like it would be weird to say, you know, I have an intimate connection with the maker of the stars, but you know what? It really has no effect on the way that I make choices. In fact, I don't even think about it most of the day, which is it's just a crazy collection of sentences. But it is even crazier reality that I think a lot of us have found ourselves living in before. Like, I know the one who kick-started history and who made us and the galaxies and everything in between, but really has no bearing on how I see myself or navigate the world and make choices. Like, I just think that having an intimate connection with God changes everything. It changes the way you talk to people made in his image completely. Like it changes the way that you treat people, no matter what they look like or where they're from or what they've done or what socioeconomic background they're from. It changes the way you spend money, it changes the way you spend time, and it should radically impact the way you make plans. The way that you make decisions in life should be shaped by the most fundamental of all relationships. It should change how you plan. And that's what I want to spend some time looking at today, because as I was looking around and studying some of the wisdom literature this week, I was skimming through Proverbs, and this one verse just leaped off of the page to me. It's Proverbs 27:1 that says, "Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring." And that's from the NIV version, but I was actually reading out of the Message, which puts it this way: don't brashly announce what you're going to do tomorrow. You don't know the first thing about tomorrow. And that verse, it stopped me in my tracks. Like, I don't know if this happens to you when you're just reading along, you're like skimming the pages of the Bible, and then bam, the Bible just like grabs you by the shirt as you're trying to run by, and it's like, you sit down right here, read this. And that's how I felt. Like it just hit a wall that stopped me right on this verse. And I was reading over it over and over again. Like, you don't know the first thing about tomorrow. And to be honest, I didn't know how I felt about it. Because on the one hand, I was like, you know what? Okay, fair enough. Tomorrow it could turn into the greatest day of my life, or I could get hit by a bus. I don't know. It's hard to say. Rooting against the latter, but I can't say for sure. But then at the same time, I'm sitting there thinking like, you don't know the first thing about tomorrow. Well, okay, yes, I do. I mean, it's Thursday for starters. I've got a few things on my agenda. I mean, I guess I could start writing them with a pencil instead, if that would help. Like, I don't know. And so I started exegeting and just looking up word meanings, because I'm really trying to figure this out. Like, do I have to stop making plans altogether? That seems like a bad idea. I feel like my fiance should be super disappointed when I tell her that we have to stop planning our wedding because the Bible told us. We'll just have to play it by ear. Just wake up one day, send her a text like, yeah, we good? Today? Thumbs up? No? Okay. Go to the next day. Today the day? And we're just waiting until we both like send a thumbs up emoji or something like that. Can't be what this verse is saying, right? And so I'm researching the word boast. Like, what do you mean don't boast about tomorrow? I was trying to figure that out. Like, don't rub it in people's face like I have plans. Like, haha, full calendar. What are you doing today? Relaxing? Pfft, nerd. Like, because if that's what it means when it says do not boast, I feel like, okay, I can handle that. I don't often like calendar flex on people, but the word boast there, it's actually derived from the Hebrew root word halal, which when used as this type of verb like it is here, it means to boast. But it actually has this much more layered meaning than just showing off. Boasting in this context has heavy undertones of foolishness. Like when we see it used in other places in the Old Testament, we see it in Isaiah, the same word, it's translated make a fool of. Or in Jeremiah, it's they will act like madmen. And so when it says do not boast about tomorrow, I think the Message version actually captures the tone and context here pretty well. When it says don't brashly, or you could say obnoxiously announce what you're going to do tomorrow. And you could probably add at the end of there, you fool. So don't brashly or obnoxiously boast about tomorrow, you fool. You don't know the first thing about tomorrow. And this idea that we don't know what tomorrow holds, or that we shouldn't take our future for granted, that we can't expect what has not yet come, it's sprinkled all throughout the wisdom literature. And it's mentioned quite a bit in the New Testament as well, like in James chapter 4, where it says, now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into that city, we'll spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why, you do not know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, We will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. And so James, he seems to be taking a pretty direct approach to the issue here. Like, he doesn't seem to beat around the bush. And taking directly from this verse, he sort of lists out, like, if you've ever said, I plan to go somewhere, if arrive there, do a thing, have a result, like James, he's talking to you. And not only is he talking to you, apparently James has a problem with you too. Do you notice at the end he calls you arrogant? And so if you've ever said anything like, I'm going to move to Chicago and get an internship, that's arrogant. I'm going to stay home and have dinner tonight. How dare you? I'm going to show up for work tomorrow. Evil. But James, he has an issue with you talking that way, and he's talking about the same thing actually that we saw in Proverbs 27. And now, why is there a problem? Like, does James really have a problem with you making plans? No, he doesn't. In verse 15, he says it's okay to make plans. But rather than just planning your life with certainty and writing it all in stone, he's saying, you don't know. Like, he's saying, don't be arrogant. Like, you're not entitled to tomorrow. And so rather than just marching forward with this false sense of certainty, you should say, if the Lord wills, then I'll do this and that. Which, if I'm being honest, I wasn't quite sure about when I was first reading the passages. Like, it just seemed like the Bible was being super nitpicky. Like, okay, I'm sorry. Like, now every time I do something, I've got to be like, well, if the Lord wills, I'll come over for dinner. If the Lord wills, I'll drive home tonight. If the Lord wills, I'll go to bed. Like, come on, man. And it just seemed like the Bible was nitpicking at semantics. But then I realized that the issue here, it's not the words. It's not like me just saying more and more, if the Lord wills before, like adding the parenthetical statement to every plan I make. Like, that's not it. The issue isn't the words, but our worldview. James's issue is perspective. And what he's challenging in us is presumption. And so he's saying, be careful before you go out and make plans and make decisions without the right perspective and worldview. And there's a couple things that James wants us to get from this. And the first one that we've already been talking about a little bit, we've mentioned it, but it's this. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. James says you're making all these plans like you assume that you're going to get to do something tomorrow, and that's presumption, because here's the thing. We have limited visibility. Like, you don't know what tomorrow will bring, which is what we saw in Proverbs 27. Don't boast about tomorrow because you don't know the first thing about tomorrow. And it's hammering this idea home that assuming you're going to get what you want tomorrow is arrogant or boastful or foolish because you just don't know. And maybe you're hearing this and you're like, okay, well, yeah, of course. I'm not a prophet. I don't know the future. Fine. But the Bible, it wants you to take that in really deeply. Like, don't assume tomorrow will just roll on like every other day. You have to acknowledge your own limitations. Like, we have to recognize and be able to say, like, I have a limited visibility. Like I said earlier, I don't know if tomorrow will be the best day of my life or if I'll get hit by a bus. I don't know that. And I really don't have control over that. And so that limited visibility should give us humility. Limited visibility should give us humility. And now, I don't know if any of you guys are Office fans watching today, but there's this one episode of the show where Meredith, one of the employees at the office, gets hit by her boss's car as he's driving in that morning. And it's hilarious. Not her getting hit by a car, but just the whole episode. And everyone's giving Michael a super hard time, which, fair enough, he ran down Meredith with his car and ended up cracking her pelvis. But he thinks the office is cursed, and it's just kind of crazy. It's this whole thing. But while Meredith is in the hospital, the doctors realize that she actually could have possibly been exposed to rabies back from when Dwight trapped a bat in the office over her head with a garbage bag in a different episode. And so they treated her for rabies and potentially saved her life, which is great. As Michael put it, the curse is broken, people. Because even though Michael didn't plan on hitting Meredith with his car, and Meredith didn't plan on getting hit, and there weren't any plans to go to the hospital, Michael's negligence happened and plans changed. And what initially hurt her ended up saving her. And obviously this is a TV show, but these things happen in real life too. Like, I remember hearing this story. There's this woman who was on her way to her knitting club. And so her plans for the day was to go crazy, knitting the day away with the ladies. And on her way in, they open the door to let her in, and she trips falling up the stairs on her knitting, and her knitting stuff just flies everywhere, which she was really embarrassed about. Like, she is just full swan dives on their front steps. And so she gathers her things. She says, oh, I'm sorry. She's embarrassed, and walks in the room. She sets some stuff down, sits down, and everyone's just kind of staring at her with their mouths open. Like, which, real awkward way to enter a group, by the way. And she's just sitting there wondering, like, what do these people deal? And then she looks and she notices that her knitting needle, like, giant knitting needle had pierced her breastplate and was resting in the left ventricle of her heart. So, change of plans. We're not knitting tonight. We're going to call the ambulance. They get her to the hospital. They run a bunch of tests and x-rays and confirm, yep, that's a needle. Yep, it's in your heart. And so they begin to work on it, and they removed the needle. They get it out. She survived the experience. And then she gets a call a little bit later that says, hey, crazy thing. We were looking at your x-rays and whatnot, and while we were looking at that huge needle sticking out of your chest, we noticed an enlarged lymph node, which is a telltale sign of breast cancer. And so she was able to get on it early, get chemotherapy, change of plans of her life for the next few months as she went through chemo, but she survived cancer. Like a cancer that she wouldn't have even known about if she hadn't got that needle through her chest. And so the needle that almost killed her actually ended up saving her life. And none of that was what she planned to do that Wednesday night, right? Like she thought she was knitting. Nope, actually, you're going to risk your life to save your life. And like, what a reminder that we just don't control things as much as we think we do. Like, we have no idea what's going to happen to us tomorrow, and it's important to understand that we don't and can't control it. Like, I have limited visibility, and that should bring some humility. Like, I'm not going to presume that I get what I want tomorrow. And I want us to be careful because it's really easy to take our days for granted and feel ownership over them and just develop this arrogance that James is talking about. Like, how many of you have had the thought in the last few months, like, man, I can't wait for the coronavirus to be over and things to just go back to normal so I can do things again and actually have a good summer? Well, what if it is never over? Like, what if you don't make it through this? And if your initial response to me asking those questions is like, oh, come on, Jeff, we're gonna make it through and everything's going to be fine. Is it? You see, that understanding and worldview and arrogance about tomorrow is exactly what this message is about. And it's something that has been repeated throughout Scripture by Jesus and James and all over wisdom literature. Now, for this specific corona example, I'm not saying, the Bible's not saying that we won't get through it, but it is like encouraging you to let your limited visibility bring out a humility that says, if the Lord wills, we will get through this. Like whether it's through different methods, through science, through guidelines, whatever it is, let it be God's will. And then Scripture encourages us to take this worldview that God is in control and not us into every aspect of our lives. Like, I think it's so easy for us, especially in the Western world, to gain the sense of control and have this desire to restore comfort and order. But I think it would just do us a lot of good to realize that we aren't in as much control as we think we are, right? I mean, James, he goes on to say that we are a mist. And that word mist, it means a cloud of smoke, like a vapor, just poof. Like, oh, there it is. What? Where? It's gone now. Like, it's as much control as we think that we have. It's only so much for so long, because the last time I checked, the death rate for humans is what it's always been, 100%. And so for us, there's this fragility to us and to our lives, and that fragility should shape our priorities. Our fragility should shape our priorities. Like Jesus spoke about this in Luke chapter 12 about a guy who was very successful in business. And he said the guy was like, man, I crushed it. I'm going to cash out, invest all my money and retire, have a blast, just eat, drink, and be merry. I won. And then Jesus ends the story by saying, like, oh, you fool, like you don't know this. Tonight you're going to die. And which you could say, like, how am I a fool? How was I going to know that I'm going to die tonight? And I didn't know that. And Jesus' answer would be like, no, but you knew you were gonna die, like someday. And the fact of your fragility should have impacted your priorities. Like Moses says the same thing in Psalm 90, where he says, you are like grass. You sprout up in the morning, and by the evening it's withered away. But then he goes on to say, like, so Lord, teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And so let me just say, no, I promise, I'm not just like trying to get morbid for morbidness' sake on us this morning. But the Bible, it's telling us all over the place that you're supposed to think about the fact that your life on earth will end. That it will impact, so that it will impact the way that you live now. Like it's saying that my fragility, it should shape my priorities. It should. And so I want to do a quick little exercise and ask you, what would you say are like the top 3 things that you're thinking about in life right now? Like 3 things that you're trying to solve in life, or what's the problem that you're trying to tackle? What's the thing that you're trying to get done? The mission that you're trying to accomplish? Or what are the top 3, or who knows, maybe you're super ambitious and you have top 5, but what are the main things that you're thinking about right now? Like, how can I get this figured out? How can I get that? How can I get there? How can I move this? What are you thinking about in life? And now let me ask you this question. What if you found out that tomorrow that you weren't going to live to see 2021? And some of you might be joking, like, I'm not sure that any of us are going to make it to 2021 the way things have been going. But let's get real. We don't actually believe that. So what if you found out for real that you had something terminal? Would those be your same top priorities? Because the reality is, and I know we don't like to think about it, probably because it reminds us that we're not in control, but the reality is, when it comes to this life here on earth, we're a mist, we're a vapor. And the perspective and reality that we're being challenged to face is that this fragility we have should shape our priorities. Like, I don't want to get to the end of my life and look back just wishing that I had lived differently. Our fragility should shape our priorities. Like, our end should affect how we live now. And this was something that I actually learned during my years of singleness. For most of college and beyond, I was single, like seven years or so. And there were times as more and more of my friends were getting married that I found myself just moping and walloping, wishing I wasn't single anymore. But I remember hearing this sermon, and the pastor was addressing single people. He was saying, you have the most time and resources that you will ever have in your life right now. Like, once you get married, you become one. Like, your lives are one. Decisions are made together. And part of that union just means having less free time. And if you thought you have less free time once you get married, just wait till you have a kid. Like, you're done. Discretionary time, out the window. And so right now, like, as a single person, you have the most time and resources that you'll ever have. So do you want to go to Starbucks? Who's stopping you? You want to travel? You pack the car and go in a few minutes. You can leave, and you don't have to worry so much about planning ahead. And did you grab the diaper bay? Honey, did you remember to have the neighbors pick up that package for us so it doesn't sit on the porch all week? Like, you're single. You don't have to worry about that. And so take advantage of this season. Use your gifts and time and talents and resources to serve and give to others in ways that you won't be able to if you weren't single. And then he said this, and this is the reason that I'm telling this story. He said, do you want to look back at your season of singleness and be like, oh man, I had so much free time and I played so much Xbox? Or do you want to look back and be like, man, I used that well. Like, I served, I gave, I loved, and I accomplished because I took advantage of the season I was in. And that's what James is saying here. He's saying, you're a mist. If we truly believe that God is the maker of the universe and he sent his son so that we could live eternally with him in heaven, let's do life with an eternal perspective and not see our lives as like a waiting room period, just waiting for our name to be called to heaven, but as an opportunity to use our gifts and talents and resources, the ones that God has given us, to love people well and point them towards eternity. Yeah? All right, so we've gone through a lot. We have our limited visibility should bring humility, and our fragility should shape our priorities. But James isn't done. That's only half of the message, right? Like, we've been talking about how we fail to see ourselves rightly. Like, we get prideful and arrogant. We seek control, which gives us this false sense of security and develops arrogance, when in reality we should acknowledge our fragility and our limited visibility in order to produce humility. But James, he keeps on going and says, hold on. You haven't just failed to see yourself rightly. You've actually failed to see God rightly. Because there's another player in this game, and he's in the driver's seat. James is saying, you need to think less about your presumptions and more about providence. But there's a reality surrounding us. We don't run the show. And we've already established that. And so the third thing that I want us to be able to take away is to live our lives through this lens of if the Lord wills. Like James said in that passage, if the Lord wills. And when we do this, I think it takes away the sense of helplessness that we felt before, and we get to the end of our, like when we get to the end of our rope, and when we've been just holding tight for so long and we just can't fit anything else in our tight death grip on control. And what's fascinating about this too is just how many people in history have come to faith when they contemplate this idea that someone else is in the driver's seat, and they're able to give up that control, realize that they're not in control. You see it in the stories of Abraham Lincoln or Andrew Jackson or Nicole Cliff, who was a woman who lived the majority of her adult life an outspoken atheist, but when she came across an obituary written for Dallas Willard by John Ortberg, and she saw there was this line that said, somebody once asked Dallas if he believed in total depravity. And he said, I believe in sufficient depravity. He responded immediately. Well, what's that? So I believe that every human being is sufficiently depraved and that when we get to heaven, no one will be able to say, I merited this. And she realized that she wasn't in control, that there's nothing that we can do and nothing we can hold on tight enough to get ourselves to where we want to go. And this idea that God is in the driver's seat and that we can't do enough on our own, it started to just break these chains of control in Nicole's life, and that jump-started her journey of freedom towards and with Jesus. And so yes, James is reminding us that we're not in as much control as we think we are, but somebody else is. Your will doesn't determine what happens tomorrow. You don't know. But if the Lord wills, we will live. If he wills, we will live. And here's the good news. He wills it because you live. And I hope that's an encouraging thought for you. I know it is for me. Like your life is a gift, and that grace should produce gratitude. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times I've noticed it usually takes some sort of like life-threatening situation for people to get that a lot of times. Like I remember when I was 15, I had my driver's permit, and I was driving with my mom and brother to go to my brother's school orientation or something. I don't really know. I didn't pay attention. It was just if I had the chance to drive, I'd do it because I like it, and I still do like to drive. And so we were driving there. It's on this 55-mile-an-hour road, and it's just straight ahead. But then there's this other road that intersects with the one that I was on, and it just makes a T. And so I was going straight ahead on my road, and then there was this bus in front of me that got into the turn lane to turn right on this T road, and in the blink of an eye, a car that didn't see me behind that bus pulls out into my road, and in about 0.2 seconds, I whipped the wheel to the right at speed. I tried hitting the brakes, but there's not enough time. It didn't slow down much, and so we dipped into the shoulder, and then I cranked the steering wheel back and straightened us out, and we were on our merry way, totally alive. Every single one of us. But I felt like a real-life stunt driver in probably the worst possible way. And my face was just blank. Hands on 10 and 2, just jaw dropped. Right to the floor. My mom, she was in shock, like, what just happened? She couldn't believe it. My brother, he woke up from his nap or something. I don't remember what his reaction was back there. But we were alive. And I remember we made it to the middle school. I got out of the car, threw my keys, and Mom said, I'm never driving again. But then she did a great job of momming and encouraged me and had a, holy cow, that was awesome. You did it. You saved us moment. And I eventually drove again. But it's just crazy how in those moments, like you think you've got life all figured out and you're cruising along and then bam, plans change. And it's out of those moments when I feel like we recognize our fragility and limited visibility the most, where it all of a sudden becomes so natural for us to be grateful and to thank God that I'm alive. To thank God every day because my breath is a gift. My family is a gift. This life is a gift, and I want to treasure it. And I think back to the moment, and it just dawns on me that I am not as in control of my life as I thought. Like one wrong turn could have ended me, but God preserved me. And that grace produces gratitude. Like I don't deserve to be here, but somebody has let me. And that's a powerful thing. Now, if everyone could just humor me for a moment. I want you to take these two fingers and just place them on the side of your neck here. You might have to adjust a little bit to get it, but what is that? What do you feel? It's your pulse, right? Like you can feel the beat. If you don't, if you got a problem, wave your other hand around. Hopefully your family can help you, but hopefully you can feel your pulse. Like that's your heart pumping blood through your body. Now, question, what do you have to do with that? You aren't making this happen, right? But if it wasn't happening, you wouldn't be here. You'd be in a lot of trouble. And you're not making it happen now. Like you're not just sitting there thinking like beat, 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 beat. But someone has decided to let that continue, and that's called grace. And when we realize it's the grace of another that keeps you alive, that just gives you gratitude. Like if the Lord wills, I will live. And he does. Which should just fill your days with gratitude. Like, God, thank you for giving me life and directing my story. And realizing that, it just gives us the humility to go, all right, now what do you want me to do with this day, God? And I love this phrase that James uses because he's saying here that everything that exists because God wills it to. Now, what does this mean? It means that God has a will. He has a desire. He has a purpose. And so we're not just accidentally here. Like there's this God who made all of this, and he continues to let this exist, and he's working it all together, and he continues to let you exist because he has a purpose that he's accomplishing. And what's so cool is that we can get alongside of that. Like understanding that, like what it does is it rescues you from a mundane life. Because so many people think that the world is this closed system. Well, the sun rises and the sun sets because the sun always rises and sets. And that's just how it works. And we go to work to earn money, to buy food, to get a job, to raise kids so that those kids can grow up and get a job, to buy food, and then die. And we all die. And we're just kind of in this little like closed system that has no purpose or meaning. And too, like meaningless. It's just the plague of our generation. But when you've realized this and know all of this exists because someone wills it to be, and that he has a will, he has a purpose, and I can align my will up with his, like that shoots every day up with every day with straight up joy. Like that makes every day amazing. I don't have to be here, and I won't always be. And yet there's a God who's chosen that I'm here, and all of us here, and we get to be a part of his story. And so please don't buy the lie that we're just in some closed system that has no purpose or meaning. Now, before I close out today, I just want to address one thing, because we've been over a lot. Like we're kicking off the series in wisdom literature, but we've been jumping all around today, and mostly because like what we're talking about today, it's found all throughout Scripture. It's just not a one and done idea. This idea that I know I'm fragile, and how that fragility should bring humility, and it should shape my priorities. I'm not going to be here very long. Like God, you made this place, you made me, you have a will, and I want to align my will with yours, and if the Lord wills, then I will live. So I know we've talked about all this, it's a lot, but for some of you, none of this sounds like good news. You go, okay then, so basically the point is I'm not in control of my life, someone else controls my life. I hate this message. Because like some of you like control and you hate being told what to do, and if we're being real honest, I think we've all been there before. But for some of you, someone has had power over your life and they abused it, and they abused you. And so talking about the sovereignty of God and your fragility, it bothers you. You say, I don't like this. I don't want this. I want my plan. And if that's you, I am so sorry. Like there is so much brokenness in the world that I just wish I could change, but that person who abused power is not the God who created you. Like James, he reminds us of that, and he actually has done this really cool thing where he's grabbed a sentence that was actually kind of common in the time for ancient Greeks. They would say, if the gods will. If the gods will, I'll make it home alive to see my family. And they said it that way because they were just, I think, living a lot closer to death than we are today. Like it was always kind of up in the air. And it's just, okay, hey, half of these boats crash, so if the gods will, I make it. If not, never see you again, I guess. Like they just didn't know. But as they said this phrase, there was a certain, like, I don't know, fear to it. There wasn't hope in saying it because the gods, they were unpredictable and mean. And so they were just like, okay, well, the gods may let me live or they might kill me. I guess we'll just wait and see. Which is kind of weird. I don't know. I guess it was maybe just their own way of reminding themselves that they're fragile and they're not in control. I don't know. But what James does is cool here because he doesn't say that. Right? He doesn't say it in the same way. He flips it and he brings hope to this phrase because he uses the personal name Lord, which maybe you've heard before in Hebrew, it's Yahweh, which is the covenant name for God. The name God says he's giving to us as a covenant, a promise to love you no matter what. James, he's pointing you towards his brother, Jesus, the Lord, the one who leads, and he is the Lord, and I can know him and I can trust him, and the more that I trust him, the easier it is to submit to him. Like it's not some random angry gods controlling my life. It is the Lord who loves me. And how do I know that he loves me? Because he's not asking you to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself. Like James, he's reminding us that Jesus, when he saw the brokenness of humanity, he didn't distance himself. But God sent him to enter the story. And Jesus, he became a human being with you and me, and he stepped into history and he took on humility. He didn't come to rule over and rise up and dominate. Like he walked around in humility and he was gracious to those who were hurting. He was tender to those in pain and he was forgiving to those who were in shame. Like he was beautiful. And yet what happened when he walked this earth is he followed the will of the Lord, which led him to the cross. And he died on that cross, taking on the sins of this world on himself, and they buried him. But he didn't stay dead. And he made death not a cave that we enter into forever, but he blew out the back end, and he made a valley that we walk through and come out the other side. And this most tragic day became our most victorious one. His death, it became our pathway to life, and his submission to the will of the Father, though painful for a season, it exploded into life like a seed in the dirt that's grown and covered with fruit. And the same will be true for you. Like the same Jesus that submitted to the will of the Father, who is good and whose purposes are redemptive, he tells you, submit to the will of your Father. Like walk with him, and I promise you, he will not waste your life. And so maybe you were listening to me most of this time thinking, okay, giving up control sounds awful. But I promise you, it's a good thing. It's a freeing thing. Like God's purposes, they're better than mine. Like I don't want to spend my life worrying only about me and building up my own little kingdom and then get to the end and wonder like what it was all for. Because that stuff, it will fade in time. I want to build God's kingdom that races on into forever and echoes through eternity because he's the true King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Like I'm going with him. He's a good Father, and you can trust him completely because he's the one who knit you together from the start, and he's willed you here. And so yeah, I don't know what tomorrow holds. And that's okay. Because this little false sense of security and control that I've been squeezing tight to for so long is nothing in comparison to walking with the God who is making this all go. We have a limited visibility, and that's okay. Like it's okay to humble ourselves and admit that. In fact, the Bible would call you wise for doing so. And our fragility, like the fact that we don't live forever, it should shape how we live now. Like again, the Bible, it would call you wise for living with that perspective of the end in sight, with an eternal perspective. And lastly, we should rest in and align ourselves with the Father. And I'll tell you what, that's not just okay. That's what we were made for. That's when we thrive and our purpose is fulfilled. So please, take the pressure off of yourself. Just release control and see what incredible joy is found in your today and tomorrow, if the Lord wills.